let's hear the question from this very low-rated anchor at CB.
Thank you, President Trump. Do you plan to ask President
Low-rated.
Bukele to help return the man who your administration says was mistakenly
Which one is it?
deported? The man who was mistakenly deported to El Salvador?
Well, let me ask Pam, would you answer that question?
Sure, President. First and foremost, he was illegally in our country. He had been illegally in our country. And in 2019, two courts, an immigration court and an appellate immigration court, ruled that he was a member of MS-13 and he was illegally in our country. Right now, it was additional paperwork had needed to be done. That's up to El Salvador if they want to return him. That's not up to us. The Supreme Court ruled, President, that if, as El Salvador wants to return him, this is international matters, foreign affairs, if they wanted to return him, we would facilitate it, meaning provide a plane.
So will you return him, President
And
Bukele?
you are doing a great job. Thank you.
Thank
Pam.
you.
Stephen Miller, wait a minute. Can you just also respond to that question? Because, you know, it's asked by CNN, and they always ask it with a slant, because they're totally slanted, because they don't know what's happening. That's why nobody's watching them. But would you answer that question also, please?
Yes, gladly. So, as Pam mentioned, there's an illegal alien from El Salvador. So, with respect to you, he's a citizen of El Salvador. So, it's very arrogant even for American media to suggest that we would even tell El Salvador how to handle their own citizens as a starting point. As two immigration courts found that he was a member of MS-13. When President Trump declared MS-13 to be a foreign terrorist organization, that meant that he was no longer eligible under federal law, which I'm sure you know, you're very familiar with the INA, that he was no longer eligible for any form of immigration relief in the United States. So he had a deportation order that was valid, which meant that under our law, he's not even allowed to be present in the United States and had to be returned because of the foreign terrorist designation. This issue was then, by a district court judge, completely inverted, and a district court judge tried to tell the administration that they had to kidnap a citizen of El Salvador and fly him back here. That issue was raised to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said the district court order was unlawful, and its main components were reversed 9-0 unanimously, stating clearly that neither Secretary of State nor the President could be compelled by anybody to forcibly retrieve a citizen of El Salvador from El Salvador, who again is a member of MS-13, which, as I'm sure you understand, rapes little girls, murders women, murders children, is engaged in the most barbaric activities in the world, and I can promise you, if he was your neighbor, you would move right away.
So you don't plan to ask for
Supreme
him
Court is
to get
asking
him back?
to.
And
that-
what was the ruling
is that your
in
position?
the Supreme Court, Steve? Was it 9-0?
Yes, it was a 9-0
In our favor?
in our favor against the district court ruling, saying that no district court has the power to compel the foreign policy function of the United States. As Pam said, the ruling solely stated that if this individual at El Salvador's sole discretion was sent back to our country, that we could deport him a second time.
Well,
No version of this legally ends up with him ever living here because he is a citizen of El Salvador. That is the president of El Salvador. Your questions about it, per the court, can only be directed to him.
I asked
¿Usted lo
President
liberaría,
Bukele, what do
Presidente?
you-
Gotta love a CNN beatdown, especially by Stephen Miller. He's our favorite. It's SeanDaniel here, filming from a hostel bathroom in Japan. Had to make this video as soon as I woke up and saw that Kaitlan Collins got destroyed. And before we hear from the El Salvador president, first of all, hit the like button if you like this video, if you like this destruction of Kaitlan Collins. But before we see the El Salvador president respond to Kaitlan Collins, pay attention to how impressive it is that Trump delegates to his people, who are more experts on this topic because they've been dealing with it directly, than him just going back and forth with CNN. Because he's got so much on his head, so many things he's got to be ready for from the media. Why not give it to your brainiac Stephen Miller? Why not give it to the AG of Pam Bondi? Now, it is interesting because apparently the Justice Department admitted they made a real error in sending this guy to El Salvador, but he's also been identified possibly as an MS-13 member, MS-13 gang member, and he's illegally been in the country, which none of the news wants to admit. They all want to call him a Maryland man, a Maryland father, a Maryland husband. That's how everybody talks about him. But Trump, Stephen Miller, Pam Bondi, and even the El Salvador president are not having it.
Can President Bukele weigh in on this? Do you plan to return him?
Well, I'm supposed to not suggesting that I smuggle a terrorist into the United States, right?
It's
I mean,
always
how can I smuggle, how can I return him to the United States? Like, I smuggle him into the United States, or what do I do? Of course, I'm not gonna do it. It's like, I mean, the question is preposterous. How can I smuggle a terrorist into the United States? I don't have the power to return him to the United States.
But you can release him inside El Salvador.
Yeah, but I'm not releasing, I mean, we're not very fond of releasing terrorists into our country. I mean, we just turned the murder capital of the world into the safest country of the Western Hemisphere, and you want us to go back into the releasing criminals so we can go back to being the murder capital of the world? No, that's not going to happen.
Well, they'd love to have a criminal,
Yeah,
released into.
I mean, there's a fascination.
They would love it.
Yeah.
They're sick, these are sick people. Marco, do you have something to say about that?
Yeah, I mean, Stephen outlined it. I don't understand what the confusion is. This individual is a citizen of El Salvador. He was illegally in the United States and was returned to his country. That's where you deport people, back to their country of origin, except for Venezuela that wasn't refusing to take people back, or places like that. I can tell you this, Mr. President, no, the foreign policy of the United States is conducted by the President of the United States, not by a court. And no court in the United States has a right to conduct the foreign policy of the United States. It's that simple. End of story.
And that's what the Supreme Court held, by the way, to Marco's point. The Supreme Court said exactly what Marco said, that no court has the authority to compel the foreign policy function of the United States. We won a case 9-0, and people like CNN are portraying it as a loss, as usual, because they want foreign terrorists in the country who kidnap women and children. But President Trump, his policy is foreign terrorists that are here illegally get expelled from the country, which, by the way, is a 90-10 issue.
Well, Mr. President, you said that if the Supreme Court said someone needed to be returned, that you would abide by that. You said that on Air Force One just a few days ago. And they said that it must be facilitated.
Why don't you just say, isn't it wonderful that we're keeping criminals out of our country? Why can't you just say that? Why do you go over and over? And that's why nobody watches you anymore. You have no credibility. Please, go ahead.
Thank God we have a president that keeps it real and calls out these people to their face, because they are sick. They take one instance. Notice it's one or two instances out of the thousands we are deporting. That's the main thing they're going to focus on, where there was possibly a mess up, a guy who was, first of all, shouldn't even be in the country. Second of all, possibly did some bad things, is possibly associated with gangs. That's who they focus on. Notice they did not ask a question about all the other thousands of people we're deporting, all the other people with criminal records that we're deporting. Did Kaitlan Collins press Trump on that? Say, wow, that's impressive. How are you able to do it this fast? Who do you utilize in your team cabinet? None of that. She's just doing what her bosses are telling her to do. And pro tip, if you think these reporters just go into these cabinet meetings, into these Oval Office meetings, without an agenda from their bosses, their producers, then I don't know what to tell you, because it's not the case. Yes, they have their personal vendettas, especially Kaitlan Collins. If you remember how she got destroyed by Trump in her town hall meeting with him.
Why you held on to those documents when you knew the federal government was seeking them and then had given you a subpoena to return them?
Are you ready? Are you ready? Can I talk?
Yeah, what's
You
the
mind?
answer?
Do you mind?
I would like for you to answer the question.
Okay, it's very simple to answer.
That's why I asked it.
It's very simple to, you're a nasty person, I'll tell you.
Can you answer why
Very
you
simple.
held on to the documents?
I was negotiating.
But her and many other anchors alike, they go in doing what their bosses tell them to do to get Trump and other people into a corner, to create division, to create doubt among the people of the U.S., like you and me, about the direction of the country. But thank God we have Trump. Thank God that the El Salvador president was willing to take a stand as well. But also thank God for my favorite man, Stephen Miller. He's just cold hard facts to the point. And if you enjoyed the video, consider hitting that like button down below. It's quick, easy, it helps me out. It's itsSeanDaniel here from Osaka, Japan in the early morning. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Here's another one you can watch. I'll see you in the next one. Hair was looking bad, so I had to throw this random thing on while I filmed this. Don't know if it helped.